Welcome to the Biblical Mama podcast, where faith and motherhood meet. I'm your host, Shelly Garcia. Each week, we dive into the beautiful chaos of being a mother and a woman of God, exploring what it truly means to live out our faith with every fiber of our being. From inspirational stories and practical advice to heartfelt conversations and spiritual insights, we're here to uplift and empower you as you navigate your sacred calling. So grab a cup of coffee, find a comfy spot, and join me as we embark on this journey together. Let's discover how to embrace our roles as mothers and daughters of the Most High, and learn how to follow God's path with grace, strength, and unwavering devotion. Welcome to the Biblical Mama podcast, where faith and motherhood meet. Hello, everyone. Happy end of September to all of you. I hope you guys have had a great month, and I want to say thanks for listening and tuning in. This is our third episode. Today, we're going to continue talking about obedience. Last time, we talked about Noah and how he obeyed God and didn't hesitate to obey. So today, we're going to talk about Abram and Sarai, and then they become Abraham and Sarah. We're going to talk a little bit about them. But first, I want to start with an example of a time that I decided to obey God in my life. So a little bit of background first for me. I was raised in the church, in a Southern Baptist church, and we went to church every Sunday. And I was saved when I was 7 years old and baptized the same day as my dad when I was 7. And like a lot of teenagers do, I fell away for a while. And then I came back to God in high school, rededicated my life. And ever since then, I've been pursuing God and trying to follow his path. And so now, as a mom, I've always been a person that has been kind of like, I try to be the one to determine my path and how the rest of my life goes. And I've always wanted to be like the one in the lead, no matter what it's for, whether it be when I was in band or when I was playing piano at a recital or whatever, or I don't know, just anything. I wanted to be the one like making the decisions, I guess you could say. And so as a mom, I have kind of been that way. Actually, I admit I've been that way with our family. And I was about, when our son was younger, we were attending a church that we no longer attend. But for me, it was like I have to take my kid and my husband to church, like, because that's the thing we need to do. And so that they can know God more and dig deeper, right? And so I can lead my son to Jesus. And anyway, after a while, I was, teaching Sunday school and all that for littles. And then we came to a point where we stopped attending for a while after my daughter was born. And it just kind of stayed that way after a while. And then I came back and it just didn't feel right. And I finally realized what I was doing. I was trying to be the person leading our household and taking our family to church and everything. So God just pointed it out to me like, hey, you're trying to be the man of the household, taking your kids or taking your family to church. He's like, you need to stop. Like, chill out, step back, and let God do the work. And so I did. And now we are actively trying to find another church that feels more like family and more like home. So anyway, about that, I just wanted to say that if you're struggling with that too, as a mom and a wife, just know that God will take care of all of that if you just step back and give it to Him. And also, prayer works. It works. And He hears your prayers. And He knows the desires of your heart. So, anyway, I want to talk about Abram. So, we're going to be starting in chapter 12, Genesis chapter 12. After Abram's dad had died, the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing." So he went, as God told him. And he took Lot with him and the rest of his family and his belongings. And so he left Haran, which is where he was living, and he decided to go, or on the way to Canaan, he decided to go to the Negeb, I think that's how you say it, which is like, I believe it's a place of like dry and vast land. Okay. And so at that time there was a famine in the land. And so Abram started doubting God, saying, there's a famine. I don't think I should stay here, even though God said that this is where He's gonna make a nation of my family, right? And so he decides to hit the road for Egypt. He goes to Egypt, and he tells his wife Sarai, "Hey, since you're so beautiful, you need to tell the Pharaoh that you're my sister, because I'm afraid they're going to kill me because you're so beautiful," which is flattering, but he's lying. He's deceiving the Pharaoh, right? And Sarai went along with it. But then it says that the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, who is Abram's wife. And Pharaoh realized that she was Abram's wife and not his sister. And he's like, "Why did you tell me this? Like, take her and go. She's your wife, not your sister. So take her and go." And so they left Egypt. And so he went back to the Negeb, or however you say it. And so when they went back, they became very rich, and their livestock was thriving. And the land wasn't able to support all their livestock and all of them anymore because they were thriving so much. So Abram told Lot, "Hey, you go one way and I'm going to go the other way, and we're just going to split and we're going to be fine." Okay. And so Lot, he decided to go to the Jordan Valley area and eventually up to Sodom. And so Abram he settled in the land of Canaan, which is where he's supposed to go in the first place. And so, let's see. And then after they all got settled, there became a war. A war came. Now, this little chapter chapter 14 is a lot of times skipped over in like all your Bible stories and stuff you learned in Sunday school and all that. But I want to go over it a little bit because it's very interesting to me, because it shows Abram's faith and his skills at leading. Okay, so there was a war. I'm not going to say all the names of the kings because I will butcher them all, and there are so many. Okay, but it was between 5 kings. They rebel against 4 other kings. The 5 kings had been serving the other 4 for 12 years, and in the 13th year, they rebelled. Okay, and so they start fighting and everything, and eventually the 4 kings, which is the ones that were over the 5 kings for 12 years. They captured Sodom, and that also included Lot. And so a guy escapes, and he goes and tells Abram, he's like, hey, they captured Lot, just so you want to know. And so Abram's like, okay, well, I'm going to go, and I'm going to save him. And so he rounds up his army, or the people that he trained, and they all go up there, and he sneaks in during the night and leads his army, and they defeat them, saves Lot, and then he gets to meet Melchizedek, which is a whole other discussion on its own. We're not going to go that much into Melchizedek, but he is the high priest. He's considered higher than the Levite line of high priests. Jesus is actually from the line of Melchizedek, the high priest, because they came from God and not like from Levi. Anyway, just wanted to point that out, and how cool it is that Abram can, lead so many people to go and save Lot, because he loved Lot. He was his nephew, and I would say he was probably like a son to him, because, Abram hadn't had a son yet. So, anyway, next chapter, God tells Abram that he's going to give him a son, because one day Abram, he starts wondering and thinking about, like, what's going to happen to all his stuff when he dies, right? And so he starts doubting God. He says, well, who's going to be the heir of all my things, and who will take care of all that stuff when I die? And God says, well, actually, your own son's going to be your heir. And so he believed him. God tells Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. That is foreshadowing of what will happen with his descendant Moses and all his other descendants, the Israelites. They're going to be slaves to Egypt for 400 years, but that's another discussion as well. Then in chapter 16, Sarai decides, hey, since the Lord hasn't given me a child yet, since he's prevented me to have kids, like he closed my womb, Abram, I'm going to give you Hagar, which is the slave that she acquired while they were in Egypt. She's an Egyptian woman. She says, Abram, take Hagar, go in, sleep with her, and have a kid with her so that you may have a child and have an heir. And so Abram does. He don't argue with that. And she conceived. And then Hagar then started to look down upon Sarai. Why? I don't know. And so Sarai gets mad, and she tells Abram, and he's like, well, she's your servant. Do whatever you want. Like, do as you please. So basically, he was telling her, you can do whatever. Like, you can send her away. You can, tell her you don't want her around anymore, whatever. And so it says that she dealt harshly with her, and Hagar fled from her. And then the Lord came to Hagar. He saw her hurt. He saw how much that hurt her. And so he said, Hagar, what are you doing? Where are you going? And she said, I'm fleeing from my mistress, Sarai. And he said, return to your mistress and submit to her. I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. And then he also said, behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. And so she said, "You are a God of seeing. Truly, here I have seen him who looks after me." And so she started believing in God and says, "Hey, you actually saw that I was hurting and you saw my afflictions and you gave me a promise." So then she went back. She gave birth to a son named Ishmael. And then in chapter 17, Abram was 99 years old. This was 13 years later after Ishmael was born. So Ishmael is 13. God makes a covenant with Abram, and he says, "I will make you the father of a multitude of nations. I am changing your name. Your name will now be Abraham. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God." So he made a covenant with Abraham. He changed his name, and he said, "I will make you a great nation." And he said, "I will be your God, and this land will be your land forever." And so to basically show, the covenant, like a physical or an outward showing of the covenant between God and his offspring, God says, "Every male among you shall be circumcised after 8 days old." So that day, all the men were circumcised. And then in chapter 18, this is the part that I think is even more interesting. So, okay, the Lord appeared to Abraham with 2 angels, and they come. He saw them, and Abraham tells. Oh, I also forgot to say, God also changed Sarai's name to Sarah in chapter 17 when he changed Abram's name to Abraham. So Abraham sees the 3 men coming, which were the Lord and 2 angels, and he quickly runs to Sarah and says, "Quick, Sarah, get some flour, knead some bread, make some cakes." And so he ran out, he got a calf, and he prepared it quickly so that they could eat, right? He was very hospitable to strangers. And so they all stood out there under a tree and ate, well, excluding Sarah. And while they were eating, the 3 men said, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And so Abraham says, "She's in the tent." Now, if you think back, in those times, when women were on their period, they would have to sit in their tents because they were considered unclean. And also, what else would they do? Walk around with nothing to, take care of it, whatever you want to call it. And so he just kind of goes around the truth and says she's in the tent. And it doesn't say exactly that she was on her period, but I am very suspicious that she was, because listen to what the Lord says next. He says, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. And so, okay, if she was in the tent, she was listening to what they were saying, and they say a year later, she will bear a son. Okay, so the Lord had closed her womb for all these years. I really think that he had opened her womb and started her cycle going so that she could get pregnant and have a son. And then Sarah, she laughs and she's like, am I worn out and my Lord is old? Shall I have pleasure? She's like, what? I'm so old. How could I? And then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, shall I indeed bear a child now that I'm old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah said, I didn't laugh, because she was afraid. But God said, no, you did laugh. And so God says, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. So, that's all I want to go through today. Is about halfway through chapter 18. But a few things I want to look at about Abraham and Sarah's character traits is, first of all, Abraham, he sometimes doubts God, right? So does Sarah, because, any woman that's, 90 plus years would think, how in the world am I going to have a kid after I've already been through menopause and everything? Like, that's just not possible. But if God says he's going to do something, then you need to believe it. Like, I know it's totally crazy, but they both doubted sometimes. And that is something I want you to take away from this, is that just because God says he's going to do something, doesn't mean that it ain't gonna happen, because it will. And another trait of Abraham is he's very hospitable to strangers. You'll see that in more of the coming stories in Genesis. He's very hospitable. He's a leader. He's very strategic, I guess you could say, because he trained all those people that he took with him to that 5 against 4 kings war. And, he said, hey, let's sneak in during the night so we can defeat them. And he saved Lot. He's very loving. He cares about his family, right? But another weakness is that he is kind of a scaredy cat when it comes to his own life. Because he's afraid that, Pharaoh's going to kill him because his wife is so beautiful. And so he's like, here, take her. Take my wife. Even though she's not my wife, she's my sister, is what he says. So he cared more about his own life there than he did about Sarah's, and which is so crazy to me. But just goes to show you that even if you have weaknesses and things, God will come and say, hey, you're doing this. You need to get back on the right path. And if you repent and get back on the right path, then God will redeem you, and he will use whatever happened in a better way, okay, for better things. And so that is what I wanted to say about Abraham and just doing what God says. Just listen to him and say, okay. Even though I know most of the time it's really hard to say, are you sure, God? It's hard not to say that. But just know that he will be with you in whatever he calls you to do. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in for the 3rd episode. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, all the socials, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and share the podcast. Once again, thank you for joining me today. Remember, you are deeply loved and cherished by God, and your faith journey is a beautiful testament to his grace. As you go through your week, May you walk in His wisdom and shine His light in all that you do. Don't forget to subscribe on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube so you can be notified about each release and all updates. Until next time, stay blessed and keep growing in His love.